What happens when a royal child is born but doesn't fit the image of perfection? Not a scandal, not a betrayal, just a baby with gentle eyes, soft features, and something in their chromosomes that whispered they were different. And in royal history, different wasn't just misunderstood, it was forbidden. For centuries, palaces were polished on the outside and poisoned within. Kings and queens demanded heirs who could ride horses, lead armies, marry well, and look flawless in portraits. But what if the baby drooled too long, didn't speak soon enough, or smiled a little too softly? What if that child had Down syndrome? They weren't celebrated. They weren't mourned. They were hidden behind velvet curtains, behind titles, and behind silence. Governments erased their names from records. Royal doctors diagnosed them quietly and removed them quietly. Nannies were paid to raise them in cottages. Mothers were told to move on. Fathers denied they existed. And the public, well, they never even knew. This isn't a story of medical tragedy. It's a story of image control, of families so obsessed with bloodlines and appearances that they couldn't accept the most human thing of all, imperfection. Today, we're opening the locked nursery doors. We're dusting off the censored documents. And we're telling the stories of royal children born with Down syndrome, the ones who were kept far from the throne, far from the history books, and sometimes far from love. By the time we reach the last story, you may never look at royalty the same way again, because these weren't monsters or mistakes. They were children, and they were erased not by disease, but by power. For centuries, royalty stood as the ultimate symbol of control over land, over bloodlines, over legacy. But when a child was born with Down syndrome, that control was tested. Most monarchies didn't respond with compassion. They responded with silence. These children were hidden, forgotten, and in many cases deliberately erased from royal memory. This isn't about blame. It's about truth. Because behind every palace wall lies a story that was never meant to be told. Today, we uncover the dark fate of 5 royal children whose only flaw was being born different and whose greatest crime was being visible. Number 5, Prince John. He was born into grandeur, the 5th son of King George V and Queen Mary. But within weeks, whispers filled the halls. Prince John wasn't like the others. His development lagged. His movements were unusual. And by the age of 4, he was diagnosed with epilepsy and, many believe today, Down syndrome, though that term didn't exist yet. At first, they tried to raise him among his siblings, but as his seizures worsened and his behavior became harder to manage, the royal family made a quiet decision. John would be sent away. Not far, just to a cottage on the Sandringham estate, but far enough that society would forget he was ever part of the picture. He lived there under the care of a nanny, isolated from royal life, public appearances, and even family events. He wasn't cruelly treated, not in the obvious sense. He received care, education, and gentle company. But what he didn't receive was presence. His siblings barely visited. His parents seldom wrote. To the outside world, Prince John faded into myth. At age 13, after a particularly violent seizure, he died in his sleep. The nation barely noticed. King George called it for the best. Queen Mary called it a great relief. No state funeral, no royal tribute, just a quiet burial. Prince John wasn't hated. He was simply inconvenient, a royal child whose condition didn't fit the portrait of a perfect empire, and so he was erased with dignity, but still erased. Number 4, Prince Alexander of Bavaria. Born in 1820 to King Ludwig I and Queen Therese of Bavaria, Prince Alexander entered the world as the ninth child of one of Europe's most prominent royal couples. At first he seemed healthy, quiet, perhaps overly gentle, but nothing alarming, yet as the years passed, his behavior grew stranger. He would pace the gardens for hours. He spoke in whispers, avoided mirrors, and was convinced, with childlike sincerity, that he had swallowed a glass piano. His condition baffled court physicians. Today, modern historians suspect some form of cognitive impairment or chromosomal disorder, possibly mild Down syndrome. But in his era, there was no diagnosis, only shame. In a kingdom obsessed with intellect and royal strength, Alexander's sensitivity and delusions were treated not as symptoms, but as a scandal. So, the royal family rebranded him. He became eccentric, artistic, a harmless poet prince with fragile nerves. Behind closed doors, though, he was quietly removed from court life. No political duties, no military post. His name remained on royal registers, but his presence was scrubbed from public view. He lived most of his adult life in monastic silence, wandering Bavarian estates under heavy supervision. Some say he believed angels spoke to him. Others say he never fully understood why his world had become so small. He died at 69, unmarried, childless, and still convinced of the glass piano within him. A gentleman, a royal son, hidden not by cruelty, but by a family too proud to say he needed help. Number 3, the lost Bourbon infant, no name. No portrait, no grave. Just a rumor, whispered through generations of royal servants, scribbled in forgotten journals, and erased from every official record. In the late 1700s, within the Bourbon court of Spain, Queen Maria Luisa of Parma was said to have given birth to a child who was born unfit to be seen. The infant, a boy, reportedly had pronounced physical deformities and signs of severe cognitive disability, traits modern experts speculate may have aligned with Down syndrome. But instead of mourning, the palace fell silent. The birth was never announced publicly. There was no christening, no official mention in the royal lineage. Witnesses claimed the child was immediately taken to a countryside monastery raised by monks under strict orders of secrecy. Even among servants, the boy was referred to only as the one who mustn't be named. Historians have found fragments, a letter from a midwife dismissed without cause, a monastery record showing a royal donation weeks after an unrecorded baptism, and a bishop's note mentioning a hidden soul born to royalty. But no proof, and that's what makes this story so haunting. Because whether the child lived for days or years, or whether he ever existed at all, one thing is certain: something was buried. Maybe it was a baby. Maybe it was the truth. But in a royal family obsessed with purity, a child born imperfect was treated as a political threat. He didn't die in silence. He was born into it. Number 2, Maria Josepha's hidden child, Archduchess Maria Josepha of Austria, was known for her devotion to duty, to faith, and to family. But in 1868, behind the marble walls of the Viennese court, she carried a secret that even royal protocol couldn't cleanse. She was pregnant. The father was her husband, Archduke Otto Franz, brother to the future emperor Franz Joseph I. But rumors soon began to swirl that the child she carried would not survive, or worse, that it would survive imperfectly. When the baby was born, details vanished. No name was listed. No baptism was announced. No midwife was honored. According to whispers from chambermaids and a single surviving letter from a court physician, the baby may have shown signs of severe developmental delay: a round face, a weak cry, unresponsive eyes. Today, many believe the child had Down syndrome. He lived only a few months. Some say he died of natural causes. Others say he was moved quietly to a country villa and never seen again. Maria Josepha never spoke of him publicly. But for the rest of her life, she wore a locket, never opened in public, never mentioned in conversation. Her other children went on to marry into royalty, but the memory of the missing child lingered like incense in a sealed chapel, sacred, suffocating, and invisible. In a world where emperors were chosen by birthright, a baby who didn't fit the mold wasn't just a personal grief. He was a political problem. So they buried him with silence.